Welcome back. We continue with the latest security situation in the Niger Delta, where the self-styled Niger Delta Avengers have been depleting Nigeria's oil output by as much as 700,000 barrels per day, a colossal amount, you would say, of revenue needed to sustain growth in an economy reeling in depression. A call has come to the president by prominent Nigerians, including the Alafin of Oyo, Obalamidi Adeyemi, and Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka, for the president to act fast to stop the crisis in the Niger Delta. Mr. Femi Adesina, the senior special advisor to the president on media, joins me from our Abuja studios. I want to thank you so much indeed for coming on the show at this time. The NDA, that's the Niger Delta Avengers, have ceased fire indeed. Now, what is the next step by the government? Have you been able to secure a window, for instance, to negotiate with the militants?
Yes, thank you, Gimba. Negotiation had always been an option, a viable option towards ending this unrest in the Niger Delta. And it's a good thing that the Avengers are finally amenable to dialogue and discussion. Before they agreed, discussion had been on with some other groups. Now that the Avengers have said yes, they are ready to talk, it can only hasten proceedings.
Now, you talk about the splitting factions of the NDA. Have you been able to identify now who the real NDA leaders are?
You just put your finger on the problem with the groups in the Niger Delta. Between the time that insurgency started again, about April, May, and now, the Office of the National Security Advisor, particularly that the president charged with talking with the different groups, I tell you, has met and spoken with more than 30 different groups. And when they meet each group, they would dismiss the other one. They would say, they are fake, we are the original. And then they would talk. And the next one will come and say, we are the authentic. And on and on and on like that. So at the end of the day, you don't know who to really talk with. And that has been a major hindrance to the dialogue in the Niger Delta.
Does this, in effect, means that the crisis may linger longer than we expected, since you're unable to identify who the real perpetrators of these attacks are?
Yeah, what then the government has done is to also engage with the leadership of the region, the royal fathers, the chiefs, men of means, men of reputation, men of integrity. And the intention is perhaps these men and women can talk to these groups if they know them, and they can convince them to come together, maybe as one body, so that that dialogue can be properly structured. If you talk with one group and you think you have reached the conclusion and you rise and leave with a feeling of amity, and then another group comes and say, well, you didn't talk with us, and they continue the vandalization of installations, then you have not achieved anything.
A dire situation indeed. But let's talk about the scope of the likely negotiations if we get to that point where you are able to identify who the real NDA leaders are. Do you suppose this will be taking place? I mean, the Avengers will, now that they are ready to negotiate and dialogue with you, do you suppose that the scope will include the initial reasons why they had to pick up arms, which is resource control, to be specific?
Well, don't forget that resource control was a subject of litigation years back under the Olusegun Obasanjo administration, and there was a pronouncement by the highest court in the land. That pronouncement subsists. It's a legal pronouncement. Therefore, if the highest court in the land has ruled, what then? are they asking for again? This is a region that wanted derivation. Derivation used to be 1 or 2%. It's now 13%. So you begin to wonder what exactly they want. And when they say they are avenging what? And avenging against who? And or avenging for who? And all that. I tell you, it's a complex situation. It's something that you don't fully understand. I doubt even the people who are involved in it, I doubt if they fully understand it. I think it's just a tendency to criminality, and they're just doing it. But what they forget is that it's our country. There's a saying that the way you lay your bed is how you lie on it.
Is there
Latest
more
statistics show that about 250 billion shortfall occurred in July. It's everybody that will bear the brunt, even the states where the pipelines are being vandalized. It will get to a point that they won't be able to pay salaries again.
Is there more than meets the eye now that Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka and, of course, other prominent Nigerians strongly asked the president to be more proactive? That's the word he used, be more proactive in his intervention to douse the tensions in the Niger Delta region?
Well, I'll say Professor Soyinka and all the other voices are voices of reason. They are credible voices. They are voices of integrity. They are voices to respect. And of course, when you have a situation like this in any country, dialogue should always be the first option. And with President Muhammadu Buhari, dialogue remains the first option. But then how fast or slow that dialogue will be would depend on who you are dialoguing with. How do you dialogue with shadowy groups that you don't know, one? Or how do you dialogue with variegated groups that when you finish with one, another one comes up and says, no, you dialogued with fake people. We are the real people. So it's a complex situation. But one thing that we are resolved on is that government will have dialogue as the first option. There are other options, but those will be last options.
Now, one major issue again that has always come up is the issue of neglect of that region, the Niger Delta. They no longer are able to fish, for example, or even farm due to soil and water pollution by oil companies, and recently by the actions of the militant bombing pipelines as well. How is the government going to tackle this problem? What do you suppose is the way forward with regards to this?
Yes, don't forget that yesterday or day before there was the information that in the past 6 years, and don't forget that while we are not talking ethnicity now, don't forget that those 6 years you had a president who hails from that region. Is significant. And during those 6 years, 700 billion naira was pumped into that region with very little to show for it. Very little to show for it. That should worry you.
Let me ask you a last question just before I let you go.
700 billion that could be used to achieve so many other things in other spheres was pumped into the Niger Delta. And
let me ask you this question just before you go, or let you go. How would you rate the Buhari administration up to this time today?
I guess I'm not the best person to answer that question, being a member of the government. But since you have asked me, I'll hazard a guess. And my answer is that yes, the Buhari administration has come at a very difficult time. But despite the difficulty of the times, it is doing its level best to grapple with the situation, get a handle of it, and then begin to make progress. This is an administration that will do well for this country. I have no doubt about it.
Senior Special Advisor to the President on Media, Mr. Femi Adesina, many thanks indeed for talking to us on State of the Nation. And when we return after this break, the plight of IDPs, they stage a protest in Maiduguri. Stay with us.